Okay, guys, this is kind of like a take two here because we couldn't get audio on the first one. The topic is, does God know the future? That's the topic of the debate that we're going to be reviewing today between James White and Tim Barber. More specifically, we're looking at Enyart Theology's review of the debate. And we've got a lot to discuss. So I know now that you can hear, because I checked it before I started. Let me just look at one thing real quick. Okay, so we're looking good here. I'm just going to wait. I had a bunch of people that jumped in here before, so I'm just going to wait a couple seconds for those people to find their way back in here. Yeah, we always start out really awkwardly. One day, we're going to have a start of a stream that's not awkward in any way. I'll just go ahead and start playing it. You guys can rewind it if you need to. All right, cool. So we're looking at Enyart Theology's review of the debate, as you can see here. And without further ado, let's start it.
James White debated Tim Barber on open theism this past Friday night. And while I'm not going to say that James embarrassed himself, this was a clear win for open theism.
Can you actually read it yourself? It sounds like you're following someone else, but if you can't read it, then I can't pursue this because you're just giving me what somebody else has said. And
what I find really interesting is that when I was originally going to do this review of his review, I was going to do it without watching either of them when I set up this like an hour and a half ago. And then I decided to watch like the first 20 seconds of this, and I saw that Enyart's tactic here is to immediately drop us in the middle of this conversation with no context whatsoever, and then make a bunch of claims about James White and other Calvinist characters based off of this no context conversation that he's dropping us in here. So let's listen to where he dropped us in. I found in the debate where it's at so that we can actually hear the conversation that's really taking place. Let's hear what he has to say about it first, so you can see what he's kind of doing here. It's weird.
James White debated Tim Barber on open theism this past Friday night. And while I'm not going to say that James embarrassed himself, this was a clear win for open theism.
Can you actually read it yourself? It sounds like you're following someone else, but if you can't read it, then I can't pursue this because you're just giving me what somebody else has said, and I can't cross-examine it.
Yeah, oidamen de hoti tois agaposin ton theon panta,
right?
Synerge.
So what's panta?
Okay, so panta would be all things.
Okay, but how is it functioning in the sentence?
It's an adjective. It's in that accusative, sort of a neuter plural.
Okay, so, all right. I don't think I can pursue that because it doesn't seem like you understand what I'm asking. So we'll move on from there.
So James, he knows Greek, which is cool and exciting and impressive. It's a goal that I personally strive for myself. But James, he tries to use this to shove Calvinism down our throats. He tries to say, hey, I know Greek, therefore you're not allowed to disagree with me on theology. But when Tim shows that he does know the Greek that's relevant to this passage, he's familiar with it, James abandons the issue completely. Not only does he run away from his own arguments, but he insults Tim as he does so. This is something that's typical of Calvinists in debate. They are the bully theologians, right?
The bully theologians. Well, what a logical fallacy that is. And let's talk about this for a second. So what he's done is dropped us with no context right in the middle of this conversation. And he is pretending, and it's a lie, he's pretending that James White just randomly brought up some random Greek and started pressing this young man on it out of nowhere. And so I was like, that's not the James White I know. And so I went to I went through the debate, and I have spent the last hour reviewing different sections of this debate to kind of catch up with the context that he doesn't give us here. And so let's read. Look, that is not what James White did. Barber brought up this passage and of his own accord said that it can be translated differently than it is currently translated in English Bibles. And he gives the other translation and quickly moves on to his other points, right? And so at the beginning of the cross-examination, with that in context, that he did that, this is what James says.
Okay, let's get into this. You read a prepared, I think you call it a translation of Romans 8:28. Would you be able to read that again, because I had never heard it before?
So he gave a translation. He says it can be translated this way. The Greek can be translated in a different way. James says, I've never heard that translation before. Can you repeat what you said? That's how it begins, right? It's not James just bragging about his Greek knowledge. It's James rising to him saying, let's talk about the Greek. And he's saying, okay, I love Greek. Please.
So you've had a debate, I think, with N.T. Wright, who translates it similarly. The rough way that could be diagrammed out, and if you would like for us to take time, we could. That passage could also be translated as, God works in all things with those who are called according to his purpose for good.
Okay, let's go look at Romans 8 really quick. What we're going to do is we're going to read what it says, and then we're going to read where I wrote down what he said. It could be translated as. Okay. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Wait a second. Yeah. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. That's what we have here. And he says that it could be rendered in the following way. God works in all things with those who are called according to his purpose for good. Okay. So we're going to take it and make an English sentence out of it that doesn't actually make sense in the English language. That statement doesn't make any sense. All right, let's listen to it again. God works in all things with those who are called according to his purpose for good. I cannot, for the life of me, get a complete thought out of that statement. If I'm missing something, please, someone let me know. But the translating in that way doesn't mean anything. It takes it from something that has meaning to a sentence structure that has no meaning. God works in all things with those. Does that mean that the ones who are called according to his purpose for good, that those people who are called are working with God in all things? I mean, that's like hypersynergism. But anyway, I want to also approach this idea of Calvinists being bullies, because look, if there's anyone who takes more seriously this command in Titus 1:13, let me rephrase that. There is no one who takes this command more seriously than Calvinists, that we find in Titus 1:13. And what it says, One of them, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from the truth. Okay. And so we have this command here to false teachers who are turning away from the truth and to fables to rebuke them sharply. And when we give out that sharp rebuke, we're called bullies as a form of virtue signaling, right? Be nice to me, even if I have turned to fables, right? Don't rebuke me sharply, rebuke me with language. That's a virtue signal that the Bible does not condone even, right? Because the Bible says don't love with pretty words. That means nothing. Pretty words mean nothing. It says don't love with pretty words, but with actions, right? That's a paraphrase, but you love with your actions. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you should be cursing people out and calling them names and just having a nasty demeanor. That's not what a sharp rebuke looks like. A sharp rebuke uses sharp language that has consequences. And so we have this kind of virtue signaling that unfortunately happens with more liberal forms of Christianity. It's this idea, you should treat me like a brother in Christ, even though the fundamental view that I have on God is heretical. And, if your view on God is heretical, then you don't have faith in what the Bible actually teaches, and therefore you can't actually be a brother. And so the virtue signal is moot on that point. But, like, hey, I'm generous to you, right? I call you my brother. It's a virtue signal. It means nothing.
They're the bullies of the theological.
We're supposed to be finishing this part.
Okay. Do you happen, when you say you're diagramming out, can you actually read it yourself?
Can I read you?
Okay, so he's given this translation of a sentence structure that doesn't really work in English, and he's saying, okay, fine. If it can be translated like that, can we do it? Can you do it here? Like, do it now. Show me how it can be translated like that, right? So James isn't just randomly trying to overpower this dude because he's been a Greek teacher for so long. He brought it up.
Okay, let me pull up the interlinear.
We don't need an interlinear. Can you actually read the Greek?
Right. And so what we have here is the guy, he probably just Googled opposing translations to Romans 8:28 and found one. You know what I mean? And so he wants to pull up an interlinear because he didn't actually translate it like that. He just did some research. Has anyone in any time put up a different translation that might in some way refute the way that Calvinists look at this, found something, and because this doesn't make sense, then, clearly God works in all things with those who are called according to his purpose for good. Since that doesn't actually make sense as a sentence, it doesn't teach Calvinism. So
It's a simple question because it seems like it sounds like you're following someone else, and it looks like to me they are going with the textual variant between panta and pon. But if you can't read it, then I can't pursue this because you're just giving me what somebody else has said, and I can't cross-examine that.
Yeah.
Right. So look, he's saying, okay, so you've given me this translation. I look at the Greek and I see what could possibly make you come up with this translation. I want to talk about the discrepancy, right? But since you're not the actual person who's doing this translation, I can't proceed with this line of questioning because you're not the person who did it, right? The guy who made this translation that you are following, he would be the only person who can answer this question if you don't know how to do what he did, right? If you're just repeating what he said, then this line of questioning is moot, and I have to move on to a new line of questioning immediately. That's what's being said here.
Oidamen de hoti tois aga posin. Is it posin or pasin? I think it'd be posin in that spot. Ton theon panta
Right.
synerge.
So what's panta?
Okay, so panta would be all things.
But, okay, but how is it functioning the sentence?
So it is a, well, I think it's an adjective. It's in that accusative, sort of a neuter plural.
Okay, so, all right.
Yes. Do you see what crossed his mind? Can you see what crossed his mind when he said that or not? I don't know what kind of discernment you have. I'm not expecting you to be a mind reader, but look, he's asking him how is this all things, this pantos, how is this functioning in the sentence that would cause you to arrange it in the way that you did? And he's like, I mean, I think it's an adjective, but it's, what did he say? It's a,
But how is it functioning the sentence?
So it is a, well, I think it's an adjective. It's in that accusative, sort of a neuter plural.
it's it's an adjective. It's in the kind of an accusative sort of a neuter plural. It's functioning like that. And James is like, you can see the gears turning in his head. How do I teach this person Greek grammar? Do I have time during my cross-examination round to teach this person what he messed up about Greek grammar? Quick decision. No, I don't have time to do that. Let's immediately move on because there's no point. What's the point in just sitting there and saying, okay, so you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about? That doesn't serve a purpose because he brought up this line of questioning for a specific reason. It's not going to go absolutely anywhere because the guy has no idea what he's talking about. So what do? We immediately move on to a new thing. In what way is James being a bully here? Please, anyone. I don't care if you're an open theist, Arminian, provisionist, Calvinist, atheist, Buddhist. In what way is James being a bully here? That's why you have this virtue signaling bull crap, man. And I really don't appreciate it. Because not only are we dropped into this with no context whatsoever, and we get half the conversation edited out of it, and no context for the conversation, but we go on to attack James' character and call him a bully theologian and all these other things, and it's just ridiculous. But hey, that's what Calvinists have to deal with literally on a daily basis.
Okay, so, all right. I don't think I can pursue that because it doesn't seem like you understand what I'm asking. So we'll move on from there.
Right. You have no understanding of what I'm even asking you. We have to move on. This line of questioning makes no sense. That's not an insult. Right? We want to paint that as an insult. Oh no, he said I don't understand what he's asking. That's so mean of him to say that. Okay, but he just demonstrated that he doesn't understand what he's asking, and he doesn't even understand why it could be translated like that in the first place. Please. Maybe Enyart just doesn't understand what took place there. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he's not lying. Sometimes I call people liars just because they say things that aren't true, but maybe it's ignorance. I think that I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt in regard to their intelligence, though. Like with Idol Killer, you guys know how many times I've claimed that he's a liar, but maybe he's just dumb. That's a possibility, and he's not lying. He's just saying things that aren't true from ignorance. That is a possibility.
Does a child's cancer ever surprise God?
So, surprise.
Let's move back to Enyart. I want to hear what Enyart is saying.
World. Guys like Tyler Vela, for example. Tyler, because of his Calvinism, he left the Christian faith, and we continue to pray for him. But guys like Matt Slick, they're extremely rude in their debate. Calvinists who are just jerks, no other way really to put it. Then James White, of course, is the pinnacle of this.
I don't make mistakes. I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger.
So to prove that James White is the pinnacle of a jerk theologian, he's going to play a supervillain, pretending to be a good guy, instead of giving any example whatsoever of James being a jerk to anyone. I wonder why. I wonder why you would need to go to a real jerk, a fictional jerk, I guess. Why would you need to do that? Why wouldn't you just play a clip of James being a real jerk? You know, I could do that right now. I could do that right now for Leighton Flowers. If there was a reason I needed to say that Leighton Flowers is a jerk, I could just go right now to any number of his videos and play a clip like that, and have to play a villain and then just say that this is James White after every debate. Because, you know, I've watched James White's synopsis of every debate, and he's never said anything like what this guy just said. So it's just weird. It's just weird to me that as a Christian with Christian followers, that you would lie and mislead people in this way. It's the strangest thing to me, and it seems to be most common in places like open theism and provisionists to me. What they do is paint this picture of Calvinists being that way, and then they do things like this that make them look like jerks. But because they just said that we're the jerks, you can't just turn around and say, no, you're a jerk, right? Because then it's like we're just flipping what they said. So
I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better.
And it has been encouraging, even in my lifetime, we've had non-Calvinistic Christian theologians stand up to these bully Calvinists: Bob Enyart, Will Duffy, Leighton Flowers, Warren McGrew, Chris Fisher, Bo Hornick, those types of guys. We have an impressive roster, and it now seems that Tim Barber has joined that roster. This was a decisive victory for open theism over Calvinism, and we're going to give a little bit of a recap of the debate. By the way, I know that not all Calvinists are jerks. I have plenty of Calvinist friends who are close to me, who are really wonderful people, but there is a problem of a very large and vocal group of Calvinists who frankly are jerks. And
okay, but can we get an example though? Hopefully we can get an example of that.
James White is one such Calvinist, and so I'm happy that open theism is growing and taking over. I have a few clips.
Am I a jerk? Yes. That's besides the point, though. I was a jerk before I became a Calvinist.
From this debate that I would like to share, but before we get into that, I want to take a look at how both James and Tim reacted, because often you get a good feel for who won the debate based on how they reacted. Tim, he posted this on his channel claiming that he believes he won the debate, and so clearly he's confident about it. He's promoting the debate. James, on the other hand, he recently posted this on X, and this is not especially encouraging. Thanks to everyone who came out or watched online tonight's debate. Pretty disappointing on many levels, but hopefully still useful despite that. I will be establishing a new rule for all future debates. Seriously. And so he adds parentheses seriously in there, because he knows that what he's about to say is a little odd. It's a little odd. It's a little like people will be caught off guard by it. They'll think, why would you have to do this? So he recognizes that this is a little bit weird, but he says, if you must read your opening statement, fine. However, rebuttals and closing statements should reflect the actual debate as if it was taking place. Pausing here.
Yeah, that's so weird. Right? That is so weird that that as a debater, going into the debate, James is going to require you to rebut what he actually says and not just having written out a rebuttal to your imagination prior. Right? I mean, what if you do that and your opponent's position on scripture slightly changes? We're infallible humans, right? And he gets up there and says something slightly different than what you've studied. Then you just sound dumb. It makes sense. It's a rebuttal. We got any sales people in here? Any people who do sales? What is a rebuttal? Okay. And a rebuttal is you organically responding to what the customer is saying when he's rejecting your product that you're selling, right? No, I don't think I have the money for that. Right? Okay. You rebut that specifically. A lot of my customers felt like they couldn't afford this until they saw how much it saved them in the long run. Right? It's a rebuttal, organic to what's actually being said.
Here, as we'll see, Tim Barber, he successfully predicted what all of James White's arguments were going to be, and he came prepared, and so James was upset about that. Having your rebuttals and closing statements written out beforehand simply means you are not debating. You are just there to make a presentation that will be interrupted by the other guy once in a while. That's not debating. If you can't listen, take notes.
Exactly. That's not a debate. It is a second opener. It's a shorter opener to cover things that you didn't quite get to. Nothing else.
And interact. Most people can't do that. Then maybe you should reconsider doing debates. By the way, as you would see if you watched the video, Tim, as he was debating, he was taking notes, he was writing, and of course he did have pre-written notes before the debate that he referenced, that he went back to. But he did do exactly what James is describing there. He says, Flowers did it to me twice. Akin did it to me twice. Tim Barber did it tonight. There won't be a twice. It's disrespectful to your opponent, to the topic, and to the audience. And so this is somewhat discouraging to hear this from James. He's kind of throwing Tim under the bus because Tim came prepared, and the consensus is that James was not quite as prepared as Tim was. And so it was a little bit messy. There's been a lot of people commenting.
Now, see, but look. Here's the thing. You're going to pretend that James didn't come to this. James didn't come to his 200th debate prepared. How many debates has he had with open theists? You don't think that he's prepared for this debate. When James White comes to this debate, he's got what he's going to say in his opener, in his mind, right? He knows the scripture well enough to do that. And he is mentally prepared to respond to what his opponent is saying, right? It's a different kind of preparation. It's a flexibility preparation. It's a thinking on the spot kind of preparation, right? I mean, look, because I'm going to tell you what, if James had done the same thing that he did, which is just do some research about what open theists teach, he would have sounded like an absolute fool up there. Because the things that Barber contradicted so many open theists during this debate. And the way that he got around that is by saying that, well, open theism is just so flexible. It's so flexible. So, anyway. Yeah. Like if James had gone up there and written out a debate for what Idol Killer believes, he would have sounded like a fool. even though both of them are open theists, he would have sounded foolish. Because, and the reason I say that is because Barber said things like, I affirm that God does know the future, but he only knows it in certain circumstances and stuff like that. He says that it is possible for God, and he probably did overthrow the will of many people to bring about the death of Christ in the exact way that he had ordained it. Yes, he did do that. Open theism is flexible enough to allow that to happen in a specific circumstance. So anyway,
the opposite, saying essentially, no, James, it's pretty much you who's disrespectful to the other side and to the audience in.
okay, but in what way was he disrespectful though, right? Because James just laid out what the disrespect is, right? And now you're just making the claim that he's disrespectful, but you don't actually have any example of disrespect.
Debates. I know this firsthand after my dad's debate with James White. James White put out a video calling him a cult leader, and me going to his church, I would be a cult member. So,
oh, wait. So, okay. If you're a cult leader, is calling someone a cult leader disrespect? Or is that respect for every person who's being fooled by the cult that this person is leading? I think that's the virtue signal. Don't call me a cult leader. I'm your brother in Christ. Right? I'm generous to you. I'm generous to your views. It's a virtue signal to try to make it look like you are, displaying fruit of the Spirit. Right? But I hope you understand what I mean.
he's not especially been respectful of the audience in the past. He does that consistently. This random guy commented on Twitter, what I find most disrespectful is how you talk about your debate opponents after each one. You're nowhere near as convincing as you seem to think you are, but somehow your confidence in your performance is always unabated, not very edifying. And I think that's a...
Yeah, okay, but again, we've got how you talk, right? How you talk, but no specific example.
pretty accurate description. The gospel truth, that's a...
Like, is it disrespectful for James to say that he prepared a rebuttal beforehand and didn't actually approach what he said? Is that disrespectful? If that's what he did? Is it disrespectful to say that someone doesn't understand your question if they display that they don't? I think that you're just mad because he called your dad a cult leader, and now you're trying to get revenge.
Calvinist YouTube channel. I've appeared there in the past for debates.
That's a good question. Why am I responding? Oh no, he's talking to John Mackey. Okay, I'll get into the audience a little bit later. We'll have some time for some discussion. I got you guys in my sights here. We're gonna talk later
on the topic, and even a Calvinist-leaning audience seems to agree that Tim won pretty handily, right? 57% we see there. Even lifelong fans of James White are admitting that, hey, Tim won the debate. And so how did James lose the debate so badly? Well, there are a number of reasons, but primarily because James used the same tried and not so true arguments against open theism. Recall that the topic is, does God know the future exhaustively? And there's two primary positions to this debate. The first is the Calvinistic view that God has exhaustive foreknowledge of the future with 100% accuracy, and deviation from his foreknowledge and eternal decree is impossible. The second view is the open view that God has plans for the future and that he establishes his plans and brings them to pass, but that literally not every single detail is part of God's plan. And so which parts are opened and which parts are settled? Well, under the open view, there's some deviation, but as a rule of thumb, sin is not part of God's plan. So it is a wicked Calvinistic teaching that God planned out every single atom of the universe, its course throughout all time and space, where it would ever be, even, including during crimes, during sins.
So if that's the case, then if that's evil, if it's evil to say that God is doing that, then what in the world does the Bible mean when it says he holds all things together? This is Christ, by the way, holding all things together, not just the Father or anything like that. This is Christ himself. Okay, so we got a real problem with the idea that God is determining all molecules in the universe to do what they've done. Okay, well, if he's not doing that, then he also cannot be doing this. It says of Christ here, he is the image of the invisible God, a topic we touched on yesterday, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, which are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions. And now remember, these thrones, dominions, and principalities and powers, these are evil things, right? These all things are evil. That's why the weather is in here, right? He's created all things. That's whether it's a beautiful blade of grass or if it's a dominion, principality, or a power. Christ has created all things. All things were created through him and for him. That means these evil guys were created for Christ, and they were created through Christ and by Christ. He is before all things, and in him all things consist. In him all things consist. He's the head of the body of the church, who's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, and all things he may have the preeminence. There's another verse. Hebrews 1. I think this is kind of the one that I wanted to go through at first, even though that one was pretty good for us. God, who at various times in various ways spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the worlds, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, catch this, the fact that Jesus is the brightness of the glory of God, he's the express image of the person of the Father, because that's true, he's upholding all things, which includes those powers and principalities, by the word of his power. Right? They don't even have life unless Christ is upholding those, spiritual molecules. It is whatever those happen to look like, nobody knows, but whatever it is, he's holding those things together. And that, of course, applies also to the material realm, all the atoms in our body. For me to commit a sin, like, I don't know, walk up to the gas station up here and steal something, right? For me to reach my hand out and grab the item, Jesus has to be upholding the molecules of my hand. Not only that, but the neurotransmitters in my brain that are firing toward the rest of my body and giving it commands to do things. Jesus is upholding the neurotransmitters in my brain, allowing them to fire. Right? We're talking about all things. He upholds all things by the power of his word. Right? It's either all things or it's what? What else could it be? All right, we're not looking at this deeply enough. Not taking it to its full conclusion. If God is upholding all things, that includes even my thoughts. Right? Neurotransmitters are things that exist in this universe. Without Christ upholding them by the power of his word, they aren't allowed to fire. My arm will never reach out for the thing I'm about to steal. The thought won't even ever cross my mind if every molecule of my brain isn't being upheld by Christ.
Stuff like that. And so when a man rapes a little girl, every single tensing of that man's muscle, every tensing and loosenings of his muscle fibers as he's restraining a little girl to rape her, all of
Okay, so now we need to make a really big distinction, because while Christ is upholding all things, including our transmitters, and yes, the fibers of our muscles as we're doing them, does that mean that Christ is using that power to move us like a puppet? As in, Christ is actually the one committing the abuse rather than us, because we're just a puppet who's on a string being moved by Christ, who is upholding our neurotransmitters by the power of his word. No, it does not mean that. Why, though? Why doesn't it mean that? It doesn't mean that because the wickedness that man commits comes forth from his own heart. Right? The heart is conceived in the womb. God says the thoughts and the intentions of the heart are only continuously wicked. And so the heart that we receive has intentions and thoughts that are only continuously wicked. We act out the wickedness that is inside of our hearts. It's not like we have a neutral body that is completely void of any thoughts or actions. We have a prior disposition that is explained in the Bible as having a heart that is whose thoughts and intentions are only continuously wicked. Jesus says that all murderous and how else does he put it? All these things come from the heart and defile a person. Matthew 15:18. Okay, so Jesus said, "Are you also still without understanding? Do you not yet understand that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and is eliminated? But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications," which would be the example he's given here, "thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man." Okay, these things, where do they come from? Right? Do they come from Christ saying, "Oh, I really need a girl to be SA'd right now for my purposes, so I'm going to implant this evil desire into this man's heart, and then he's going to fulfill what the Father decreed for him to do before the creation of the world"? No, because what did God do? He created Adam through clay. Adam fell in sin. Romans 5:12 through 21. Through one man's offense, Let's go there so we don't mess it up. Through one man's offense, through one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. But down here in 18, therefore, as through one man's offense, judgment came to all men, resulting in condemnation. Right? And so they like to paint this picture of us saying that God is just fashioning people with this evil nature, when in reality, what we have is an organic process through sexual reproduction of people being born under this condition, which leads to the heart condition that we just saw in Matthew, right? Where these things come directly from the heart of the person, right? And people seem to think that Calvinists think that people don't make choices. Like the person who's committing this heinous crime that the man is describing now, that they would say, that the Calvinists would say that they didn't actually make the choice to do that. They had no choice, right? They did make a choice to do what they did. But they made, but they didn't make that choice from a place of absolute neutrality. Why would you, right? Why do you make a choice to commit sexual assault from a place of neutrality? That makes no sense. You commit SA from a place of lust, right? From a place of desiring fornication. Where does that come from? That comes from inside of your heart, right? It starts inside of your heart, and then it goes from there, right? Then you start taking actions based on what's coming out of your heart. And for you to take those actions, Christ is upholding all things, including the neurotransmitters and the muscle fibers in your body, allowing them to do exactly what you're doing. Now, that raises another question of if what you're saying is true, then you're not describing determinism. You're describing some kind of form of free will that's highly influenced by internal forces. Where does the determinism come into play? Well, that comes into play in all of the circumstances surrounding this person's life that they don't get to decide, right? Where they're born, what their parents, who their parents are, and what kind of life they had under their parents, what kind of experience they had when they were children growing up, whether that ever happened to them. They don't get to choose any of that stuff, right? Any of the circumstances that you are in your life, and not absolutely zero of them do you choose. But in Psalm 139:16, God says he has a book in which he has established all of your days, right? And so when this man who is committing this heinous act, because lust has built up in his heart from these various events that have taken place all throughout his life, those days in which those events took place are established by God, according to Psalm 139:16. Let's go there real quick. God has a book in which he has established these things. An actual book, like the book of life, but different. A frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. And in your book, they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them, right? And so when you didn't have any days yet, you are at 0 days. God's book already contains all of your days. Your good days, your bad days, your SA days. If you ever have any days like that, they were written in God's book prior. This right here refutes most claims of open theists right here. Because what is God modifying this book based on what he learns happens? No. That this book is written. It tells you when there were none of them, before zero. You know, this particular passage doesn't say that the book was written before the foundation of the world, but you would use other passages to specifically time that, such as he declares the end from the beginning, right? These days have an end, right? You have an end to your life. You have a last day where you're going to die. God declares the end from when? He declared the end of the things that were written in this book when? From the beginning.
Of that down to the atom is part of God's decree, his foreordained plan under Calvinism. And that little girl is going to be raped exactly how God decreed that she would be raped, and exactly how God wanted her to be raped, and what way that rape would bring God the most glory. That is what Calvinism teaches, because Calvinism is an all.
So when we say that, and we say it in the emotional way that we're presenting it here for people who are listening, they're like, oh man. And they're considering the actual act taking place, right? In their minds, they're imagining it. I'm sure you've already imagined it because of the imagery that it's used, which is, I always say this. It's really strange to me that the first thing anyone does as soon as they try to refute Calvinism is imagine the most heinous sexual crime they can imagine. That's a very strange thing to do. Everyone does it. I have no idea why. Can't you just stick with what's in the Bible? You really have to sit there. And why is it that Calvinism makes you sit there and imagine heinous sexual crimes? That's very strange to me. But throwing that aside,
that rape would bring God the most glory.
Throwing that aside, when you paint this picture like this, you're sitting here imagining, oh, how could this possibly be glorifying to God, right? You're imagining the penetration and the scream and the begging and please no and the blood and all those things that come with it, right? That you love to imagine as soon as you start talking about Calvinism for some strange reason. And you're imagining, but you're not taking it any further than that. You're not taking it to that Romans 9 glory place where God is saying in what way? In what way is reality? In what way is the reality I have put forth glorifying me? In what way? Here we go. If all this is true, if all what I'm saying is true about this man who's committing SA on a little girl, you might say to me, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted his will? But indeed, oh man, who are you to reply against God? Will the essayer say to him who formed it, why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have power over the clay from the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor? What if God, wanting to show, this is it, this is the purpose right here, and me and Hayden, actually, who is in the chat right now, me and Hayden were discussing this briefly earlier, and he hasn't approached it yet. Maybe he'll approach it now. What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? Okay, and so this destruction of this man who's committing SA on a girl is going, maybe, to be destroyed, right? And that's going to be one of the things that he's destroyed for. And when God destroys someone for committing that act, He's glorified through that, right? He's not glorified in the act. Nobody's saying that. It's a straw man. You're not looking ahead. You think God is, though? Yeah. So when God destroys this person who has done this, he receives glory for a just judgment, right? This happened. This is how I respond to it. Destruction. Or perhaps this man who has the same kind of evil living in his heart that every single Christian had, maybe he's on the other half, that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had prepared beforehand for glory. Okay? And so when this man commits a heinous crime and God forgives him for it and shows him kindness, changes his heart, and makes him a vessel of mercy, he's also glorified for that, for his mercy on that person, right? He did these terrible things, but instead of him receiving judgment, Christ took his penalty because he loved the man despite all the things that he did, because he loved him before that. He loved him first, right? We love God because he loved us first. And so we're not taking it out to the final conclusion, is what I'm saying. When the man gets destroyed for what he did to the girl, God's glorified. When the man finds forgiveness and salvation, God is glorified in his mercy. Look how merciful God can be towards someone who does such a terrible thing.
That is what Calvinism teaches, because Calvinism is an all-encompassing everything, every single detail is foreordained by God. And so the open theist view is a much more humble, okay, maybe not every detail.
So the open theist view is more humble. Is humility inherent within that statement? See, that's the trick.
Not everything is part of God's plan. Maybe sin, especially, is the opposite. It's a rejection of God's plan. And so the Calvinists, they're going to have a difficult time winning this debate. Point in case with James White, they have a difficult.
Oh, beyond the fundamentals. Don't give me that garbage. Don't give me, I'll leave the speculative inquiry to you. Don't make me go to your channel. Take it back. Take it back.
Time.
We know you. Come on. Don't be silly.
I'm winning this debate because they cannot just point to a single event and say, hey, see, this was settled beforehand. It was settled in advance. They can't point to something like that as a proof text because open theists already agree there are some events that are settled, that were planned from the beginning, right? Just not all events. And essentially, this debate came down to James White saying, hey, here's an example of an event that was settled before it was happened. It was planned out. And then Tim, the open theist, says, well, yes, some events are planned out. I agree with that. We've been saying that the entire time. But the point is, all events are not planned out, right? They're not part of God's plan, especially sin. Sin is a rejection of God's plan. And so throughout this debate, James will make a lot of...
All right. So we're making the overarching statement here that sin is not part of God's plan. It's just not. Sin is not part of God's plan. Let's look Let's look at a great example of sin being part of God's plan. So I know we like to sit here and imagine beyond the fundamentals loves to do this too. I've heard him do it. It's the craziest thing in the world to me. It really is. I'll say it for the third time. These guys, as soon as they start trying to refute Calvinism, the first thing that they do is see what the most heinous sexual sin they can imagine is. Okay. Are you doing that because you have some kind of affinity towards imagining those things? Or, and I don't want to leave that, maybe that's not it. Maybe you're doing that because you need an example of sin, and that's the worst sin that you can think of. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the reason you always do that. Well, if that is the reason you always do that, you're wrong about it being the worst sin, because the worst sin ever perpetrated by humanity, or anyone for that matter, is the murder of Jesus Christ. Why? Because it is a cosmic anomaly. The wage of sin is death. And you're going to give death to Christ? The wage of sin? You're going to give the wage of sin to Christ? That's the murder of Christ is the worst sin ever committed. Now let's look and see if that was part of God's plan or not. We'll start back a little earlier. Being let go, they went to their own companions and reported all that the chief priests and elders had said to them. When they heard it, they raised their voice to God with one accord and said, Lord, you are God, who made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, who by the mouth of your servant David have said, why did the nations rage and the people plot vain things? The kings of the earth took their stand, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against his Christ. For truly, against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. Now, Lord, look on their threats and grant to your servants that with all boldness they may speak your word by stretching out your hand to heal, and that signs and wonders may be done. Okay, so the point, though, of the passage is what was determined beforehand to be done. What was determined beforehand to be done? Well, what did Herod do? Herod did a version of what you're saying right now, except without the SA part, just killed a bunch of 2-year-olds. Right? All the 2-year-old male children in the area, Herod killed them. That's what he did in this scenario, isn't it? He was trying to kill Jesus on his second birthday. He was trying to kill Jesus. He's trying to get this started way early, right? And to do so, he kills a whole bunch of children, a lot of them. And we have a prophecy, even, of that being taking place, about Rebecca crying out for her children, right? Or Rachel crying out for her children, sorry, I think, instead of Rebecca. But anyway, what about Pontius Pilate? What did he do? Now, Pontius Pilate, we can go look at his story and watch him desperately try to figure out a way to get around it. And yet he still committed the evil that God prepared beforehand for him to do. Right? Why? Because he couldn't get out of it. The circumstances were too powerful. He's a man of power within the Roman army. He's got all the Jews in front of him, telling him this man must be sacrificed. He must be killed, not sacrificed. He must be killed because he's a blasphemer. He's blasphemed our God. By our laws, he has committed blasphemy. He must be killed. Pilate, you Romans want to be in here? You Romans want to be here doing the law here? Then you got to do the law. Right? We're saying he's got to be killed. This has been written for thousands of years. This man has to die. So, in that way, Pontius Pilate did what was purposed and determined beforehand for him to do. Right? The Gentiles and the people of Israel. The Gentiles, the Roman soldiers, Roman soldier who stabbed him in his gut, in his rib with the spear, determined beforehand to be done. People of Israel giving him up, determined beforehand to be done. A multitude of sins. Judas. Right? And we have even more than this to prove that what Judas did was determined beforehand to be done, because Jesus says, I have lost none except for the one, or except for the son of perdition, so that your purposes will be fulfilled through that. Or we have a prophecy that says that will take place. God doesn't exhaustively know the future? Ridiculous. And so my major point here is, you think that these sexual crimes that you love to imagine, for some reason that's unknown to me, why you love imagining them so much every time you try to refute Calvinism, those are not the worst sins. Our sins were committed right here in the context of this passage, and all of those were determined beforehand to be done by God. So, how, since this is the worst, a lesser sin should be pretty obvious. Let's look at a lesser sin. Let's look at an example of a lesser sin. What's a lesser sin than this? Joseph's brothers beating him up, tearing his cloak, throwing him in a pit and leaving him for dead, changing their minds, selling him to a traveling caravan that into Egypt as a slave. That's pretty bad, but still less than murdering Jesus. Most of you probably already know where I'm going with this. Some of you don't. But Joseph gets to Egypt, and we won't go through the whole story, but through many trials and tribulations, which result from this evil that his brothers committed against him, he ends up in a place of power in Egypt, the second in command, and he has the power to condemn his brothers. He could have had them hung. He could have had them whipped, beaten, flogged, imprisoned, whatever he wanted. That's why his brothers are terrified, right? It's Egypt. We're talking about Egypt here. Who would go on and hold all of Israel as slaves, but not yet. Joseph says, when they're afraid, do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Right? Have I been given the authority to judge? No. Christ has given that authority. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Meant. God meant it. God meant for this to happen. Why? In order to bring it about, as it is this day, to save many people alive. The same reason that he brought about the evil that was done to Jesus. In order to bring about his plan of salvation. And we see in Isaiah 53, right? So not only does Acts tell us that all these things were determined beforehand to be done, not only do we have prophecies telling us that this is going to take place and that God knows for 100% certain that it's going to take place, but we have this. He was oppressed and he was afflicted. He's describing the sins. Yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, prepared beforehand to be done, right? And as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And who will declare his generation? For he was cut off, like Daniel 9:26 says, in the middle of the great tribulation. He was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken. And they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He has put him to grief. It's powerful. Powerful language, guys. It pleased God to bruise him, right? And so we have another instance of what is being said in Genesis 50. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. He meant it, right? It pleased him. He meant for it to take place. Why, though? Does God just enjoy seeing people suffering? Does God just enjoy seeing, oh man, I just love it. I just love seeing my son suffer on the cross. It makes me so happy to see it, right? No, it's not the act. It's not the act. It's the purpose. It's the ultimate purpose of the act that pleases God to do it, right? It pleases God to bruise him because if you are in Christ, he bruised him for you. That's where the pleasure comes from. He did it for you. He did it to save you. We're not following these kinds of things to their conclusion, is what I'm trying to say. But let's take a look at some of the things. I know that the chat has been kind of popping off here, but if anybody has a question, we'll go ahead and take a quick break to answer some questions. Just throw in a big capital Q with a colon next to it. You don't have to give a super chat or anything like that for me to answer a question. Just put a big Q and a colon, and I'm going to use the bathroom real quick. And when I get back, I'll answer what questions we have. All right. Let me just kind of play this real quick. Oh, I don't have it. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, well. Okay, that's fine. We'll just look at this guy's face while I answer your questions. Maybe I can put, let's do it like this. Let's refresh that. Let's do it like this so we can see the live chat as we're doing it. I think this is one of my best thumbnails. Hey, what is this? Let me turn that back on, dude. Goodness gracious. Hang on a second. Let's do it like this. View channel. Okay. I'm going to mute. Okay. I'm going to mute. Okay. I'm going to mute. Okay. Oh, this is weird. Mute. Okay. Just keeps repeating the same thing over and over. Mute. I got to close this out. All right. We're just going to do this. Everything's so weird around here sometimes. I know it, guys. All right. Let's see if we got any questions. I'm going to scroll up a little bit here. What's up, Caldwell? Good to see you, man. 7 Crickets in the house. John Mackey, what up? Oh, Beyond the Fundamentals hasn't seen so many one-dimensional small minds in one place since the James White debate. I'm sorry, Beyond the Fundamentals. That really hurts our feelings. Got any cues? All right, we got a question from Jamie. Let me scroll up, though, and see if that's the only one. I don't know how long I was gone. Who could be calling me at a time like this? It might be my son's school, so hang on. Okay, now that was my son, my kid's school calling, but everything's fine though. Everything's good. It's all good. All right, let's go to the chat here and see what kind of questions we got. God did it, bro, Calvinist. Yeah, Jamie Russell. I know, like, you don't have any choice but to lie about what I say. You don't have a choice. That's what being enslaved to lying sounds like. You don't have a choice but to lie. It's not like you're going to quote me and say exactly what I said. You're going to lie. Why? He who commits sin is a slave to sin. You got to be set free by Christ. Until you're set free by Christ, you don't have the option. You're just going to sit there and lie about what I say, right? Try now. Try to put up quotations and try to actually type what I have said at any time. Try it. I dare you. I dare you to even try. Let's see. Show us your free will, Jamie. Put quotation marks up and type out something I've said verbatim. Dare you to give it a shot. Double dog dare. Yeah, David Liu. That was funny because I don't think we've seen that part yet in this video. So obviously you've watched the debate. When you said, "Oh, or is he just really good at getting people to name things?" That's funny because that's what he said, right? Oh, God just know the future and know that John the Baptist's name would be John the Baptist because his knowledge is perfect, like Psalm 147:5 and Psalm 139:1-4 says. He knew that John the Baptist's name would be John the Baptist because he liked the name John the Baptist, and he knew with all certainty that he could get them to name him that if he wanted them to. So, yeah. All righty then, Bumblebee Tuna. Question from Jamie Russell, RC. When Jesus says an enemy has done this, does he mean God did it? And he used an enemy? Or does he mean what he says? He means what he says. Let's see, what else? Beyond the Fundamentals said, video game creators. I love this, right? Because Beyond the Fundamentals is one of those guys like Idol Killer who has no choice but to compare spiritual things with fleshly things, right? But what does the Bible say about that? We're gonna compare the God of the universe to a video game creator, right? With limited knowledge of what programming can even do, right? You think that a video game creator has the kind of knowledge of programming that God has knowledge of creating universes? Okay, cool. Comparing spiritual with spiritual. I got this passage is really great for people that think this way. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. 1 Corinthians 2. All righty then, Bumblebee Tuna. God has revealed them to us through his Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, yes, the deep things of God. For what man knows the things of a man except the Spirit of the man which is in him? Even so, no one knows the things of God except the Spirit of God. No one. No, not one. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us by God. These things we speak, not in words which man's wisdom teaches, like not computer programming words, not biology words, not philosophy words. These things we also speak not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the Holy Spirit teaches, comparing spiritual things with spiritual, not comparing spiritual things to things that take place on a graphics card. Why? Why would someone be forced to do that, though? Why would someone be forced to compare a spiritual thing like Father God creating the universe through power of his word to a fleshly thing like a computer programming designing video game? Why are they forced to do that? Because of the next passage. The natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, nor can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he who is spiritual judges all things, yet he himself is rightly judged by no one. Who has known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ, right? And so we don't have to compare these things to material, fleshly things. It's not necessary. It's not. Not only is it not necessary, but the analogies don't connect on the eternal end. Because why? Because God's thoughts are higher than our little measly thoughts. His ways are higher than our puny ways. So when God gives us an anthropomorphic material analogy to help us understand his character, he can do that. Why? Because he does understand. He does understand in what way a material anthropomorphic analogy can be used to help us understand his character. We don't. Just because God uses anthropomorphic analogies to help us understand doesn't mean that we can jump down and turn around and make up our own anthropomorphic analogies off the top of our heads as if our thoughts are equal with his thoughts, because they're not. We'll just make an analogy that doesn't connect. And you can see that in every one of Beyond the Fundamentals videos. Every last one of them. If that's not true, put a link. If that's not true beyond the fundamentals, put a link to a video of yours in the description, in the comments right now, where you don't use a material analogy that didn't come from the Bible. It's something you made up to help your audience understand. Put it in the link and we'll go in there, and I'll apologize when we get done watching the video and there's no analogy that is the antithesis of what this is teaching. Anyway, this has been a fun stream. Sabbath breaking is a sin. I didn't catch the context on that. God didn't determine everything. See, like I told you, Jamie, you don't have any choice but to put quotation marks and then put a lie inside of them. You don't have a choice, right? I mean, you do, but it's your nature that decides what decision you make, so you don't, right? Again, double, triple dog dare you to type out a set of quotation marks and put a truthful statement inside of it. I dare you. I dare you. You can't do it. Show us what free will looks like. Show us your ability to quote me verbatim inside of quotation marks. It's not possible. Is it weird though? Is it weird to sit here and hear me tell you that it's not possible for you to put quotation marks in the text, in a box here, something that you theoretically you should be able to do it, right? You should. You believe you have free will, right? It makes sense that you would be able to do that. But you can't. Isn't that weird? It's strange. Do I sound like a magician right now? I'm not. I just believe the Bible. What else we got here? Silver Silk question said, what do you do with a drunken sailor? You join him. No, I'm just kidding. What do you do when you come to a tricky passage and want to understand it better? I would need an example. I would need an example of a tricky passage. Because in general, I would say that what you do is read it again and again and again. Read all the passages around it. If that doesn't help, read the whole chapter. See if maybe you missed something, But to give specific advice it would be on a case by case basis. I would say, it's depending on what you're not understanding, things like that. But throw me an example out there, and we'll go look at a tricky passage and see what we can do with it. I definitely don't mind doing that. Hey, what's up, Sheila? Exactly, David Liu. They do demand that the creator functions on the same plane of existence as they do. Right? They don't see God as this Psalm 139 God who has a book, which in it he's established the days of your life. They don't see him as an author, like literally existing in a whole other dimension. Right? Think about, for example, Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins. Think about his relationship to J.R. Tolkien. Okay? They don't allow God to exist in an entirely different higher dimension in the way that Tolkien exists above Frodo Baggins. Right? Why is that not an example of using a fleshly analogy? It's a dimensional analogy, right? It's a difference between the dimension that Frodo exists in, right? Now we don't have a way of spiritually making our imaginings have material being. So there really is no, analogy that you can use other than that to describe what's being said in Psalm 139 about God's book. And so, is Frodo freely acting within the book? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Every choice that he makes, 100%. 100% making free choices according to his nature. Right. Like on Weathertop, when he's afraid of the ring wraiths, right? He's not, anyway. Okay. So the video game creator has more knowledge and ability than the Calvinist God, but of course not real God. Yeah. I just want you to remember that, okay? I want you to remember that you're making a distinction between us. So next time you say, they're not being generous to me as a brother. You're not my brother. You're not. Look at what you just said. Video game creator has more knowledge and ability than the Calvinist God, little g. But of course not real God, big G. We're not brothers. So don't virtue signal me about treating you as a brother, right? Don't do it. Perhaps try reading and addressing the actual comment. I don't know which one you're talking about. So there's a lot of comments here. Let me scroll back into the video game comment. Maybe I missed something. Video game creators can declare the end from the beginning without predetermining every detail in between. Okay. I mean, obviously you don't know very much about video game programming. So I'm just going to chalk that up to you not having any idea what you're talking about when it comes to programming things. We'll just leave it at that. No, it's using analogies is not the problem. It's when you're comparing God to someone else, like a video game programmer. Nobody is saying that God is like a video game programmer. The author, the Bible just compares God to an author. So I use the analogy of J.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings because it's the same kind of analogy that the Bible uses. You see, God creates an analogy to help us understand, and then we can then go on to use the same analogy that God used to help other people understand, right? It's the same kind of analogy. It's God authoring a book in which he has established the days of our lives in the same way that J.R. Tolkien has established the days of the events that took place within the Lord of the Rings. Right? It's the same analogy that God used. I didn't come up with that analogy, right? I just came up with the specifics. I hope that helps. Jamie, I never said that God doesn't determine everything. He does determine everything. Everything is decreed. Every action, everything. Everything that has ever taken place or ever will take place is decreed by God. Okay? Please make an attempt to put quotations marks and just practice putting a true statement in a quotation marks and tell us when you have mastered free will. All right, Silver Silk has a passage for his question from earlier, so we're going to look at that. How about the passage 1 Samuel 19:9 or Judges 9:23? Judges 9:23 is probably easier to type, so let's go with that. Judges 9:3. All right. Let's see what else he said so I don't miss something. I did that earlier. To stay on topic with God's relationship to the evil in our world. Okay. All right, let's read it. After Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. But the crime done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be settled, and their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem, who aided him in the killing of his brothers. And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the troops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed by them along that way. And it was told Abimelech. Now, see, that's why this is actually one of the reasons that I asked you for a specific passage, and that's because I don't find this to be particularly tricky. I don't find anything tricky about this whatsoever. God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and there's a great example of this taking place in 2 Kings. Where is it? Here he's sending a spirit of ill will. What kind of spirit is he sending in 1 Kings 22? A dirty, rotten, lying scoundrel of a spirit. A dirty, rotten, pirate flag waving, lying spirit is who God intentionally sends in 1 Kings 22. We have another same kind of language here. So Micaiah says, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by, on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will persuade Ahab to go up, that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead, right? So that evil may befall Ahab at Ramoth Gilead, right? Or wrong? Right. So one spoke in this manner, right? One spirit came forward. We don't even get to hear what he says. We don't even get to hear what this spirit says. Apparently God didn't like it. Another one came forward in that manner. We don't even get to hear what that manner is. God didn't like that manner. Next spirit. Who else? Then a spirit comes forward and stood before the Lord and said, I'll persuade him. And the Lord says, in what way? And he says, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. And the Lord said, yes, you shall persuade him. And also, you will prevail. You'll prevail in what? Lying. You'll prevail in lying, Spirit. Go out and do so. I don't find these passages to be particularly difficult or tricky. They just say what they say, you know? So, however, I can see the only way that you would come across these passages and think, wow, this is a tricky passage, is if you already believe something about God that's not true. So, my God would never send a spirit of ill will towards someone and cause people to get robbed and killed. My God would never send a lying spirit to some prophets and say that he will prevail in lying, causing their leader to go up to Ramoth Gilead and be killed. God, my God would never do that. That's a little g God who is evil. Right? That's what Beyond the Fundamentals would say if this passage wasn't staring him right in the face. But he's got to have some way to justify it because he still has to pretend to believe it. And so the only time that this is tricky is if you already believe something that goes against this and you can't let go of it. So what's my answer? There may be some tricky passages that we just haven't seen yet. But typically, my answer is going to be to understand the tricky passage. Let go. Let go of the crap that you believe that contradicts what this is saying. That's why it's tricky. The trick is inside of your own brain, right? Because you gotta come to a place where you trust what this says about the circumstances surrounding a spirit of ill will and the circumstances surrounding the spirit of this lying, dirty, rotten, flag-waving scoundrel of a spirit. You got to believe what these passages say above what you came into it believing. And so you got to say, I'm the person whose thoughts and intentions of his heart are only continuously evil. I'm the person whose heart is deceitful above all things. So if I believe something that's in direct contradiction to this passage that I see as tricky, I only believe that thing because my heart has deceived me into believing it. And so now you tell your heart to shut up and you believe this. Now, that brings us to the question, though, how do you change what you believe? That question has been on the table for folks like Beyond the Fundamentals, Living Christian, Idol Killer, Leighton Flowers. It's been presented. I think this is my first time actually speaking directly with Beyond the Fundamentals, honestly. But to the other guys I mentioned, I have presented the challenge to them, and they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. How do you change what you believe beyond the fundamentals? How do you, if you're an atheist and you don't believe that Jesus even existed as a person, much less died for your sins, how do you change what you believe? Think about that for a second. I'm going to use the bathroom again. And the answer is you can't. The answer is you have no control over what you believe. You believe what you believe. You can't change what you believe. Try it now. Try it now. If you're an Arminian, as a thought experiment, or provisionist, or open theist, or whatever, as a thought experiment, try it now. Do you believe that Jesus is God? Okay. Well, use your power of free will to change that for 30 seconds. right? Not just say it, not just say, I don't believe Jesus is God. No, I'm not saying just say that. I'm saying genuinely actually change that you believe that in your heart for just 30 seconds, and then use the power of your free will to change your belief again back. You should be good, right? You should be safe because you have this power. Just actively change what you believe at will, just at any given moment. Just change what you believe. Right? While looking at the sky, while looking at a blue sky, you can just change what you believe about it. Right? Because I believe this is a red sky, even though I'm looking at it and it's blue. Because I have free will, what I see doesn't matter. It's red. I believe that it's red. You can say that, but without some kind of serious mental impairment, you know that makes no sense, right? You can't look at a clear blue sky and see the color blue and change what color you believe you see. That doesn't even make sense. The analogy really starts to fall apart. I mean, the whole system really starts to fall apart when you try to go backwards. When you try to just for 30 seconds change what you believe about Jesus. You believe Jesus is God? Okay, 30 seconds. Change what you believe. That even small? It makes no sense, right, guys? I mean, we all know that. Jamie, you see, this is why I'm saying you don't have a choice but to lie. You have no choice. You just said another lie. You said that I said that you lied when you claimed that I think God determined everything. No. Like, scroll up just a little bit. You put quotation marks and then you said God didn't determine everything. Then you ended the quotation mark. Is it crazy? Is it causing you to like squirm inside of your body, the fact that I'm just predicting the future of you not being able to say a true statement? It's not even possible. I'm going to just reiterate that. It's not possible. It's not physically possible right now for you to put quotation marks on the screen and quote me truthfully. You can't. You can't do it. Not possible. I'll say it again for the third time. Be wrong. Show me your free will. Okay. Okay, beyond the fundamentals, if you're an IT professional and you don't know that a video game programmer does determine every single thing that happens inside of the game, then I I don't know what to tell you, man. You got to choose a new profession. You got to choose a new profession. Really? Beyond the fundamentals, a video game programmer can do something that Calvi God cannot do. See, you're comparing this virtual world that exists in the form of pixels on a screen, this code that's being fed to it from a console, You're comparing that to a material universe. Do you understand that you're doing that? You understand that or not doing that? In what in what way are these video game programmers doing something that Calvi God cannot do? In what way? Sheesh. What's up, Jazzy? Long time no see. I don't think that I lied. I don't think that I lied during this stream. You forgive me. You forgive me for what? See, that's what you guys do. It's a virtue signal. Like, I've done something to you now because I've called out that you aren't capable of telling the truth. You forgive me for telling the truth of you're not physically capable of putting a true statement inside of quotation marks. That's not, okay. I thank you for your forgiveness, I guess. That's so Christ-like. Beyond the Fundamentals says, I've never met a Calvinist who could give an opposing argument a fair shake. I don't know what a fair shake means. Without stigmatizing it for more realistic reasons and deviating from epistemic principles. Okay, well, English, Doc. English. I have no idea what you just said. Yeah, robot. God did send an evil spirit, a lying spirit, and told him that he would prevail in that sin of lying, and then told him to go do it. So, yeah. Not trying to be conceited or anything by saying that I don't find it to be a tricky passage. It's just not. It just says what it says. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's clear. It's clear. We make the passages tricky by coming into them with presuppositions. Right? I don't have to have any presupposition about anything ever. I could just be walking up this Bible for the very first time, right? And read this story and see exactly what's taking place here. Right? You don't have to presuppose anything. You just read this and believe this as it says, or you're going to presuppose something. I mean, I haven't heard any of you guys try to approach this stuff like beyond the fundamentals. This guy who's supposed to be, I don't know, really knowledgeable about scripture, and you're not even approaching this at all. You're not even talking about it. You're just blabbering about video game programmers and about, you're just making up you're just making up things about Calvinists and stuff. Like, you approach the argument that's being said here. I've never seen a Calvinist epistemological stigmatized, deal with the passage we're talking about. Yeah, yeah. You're right, Shane. You're right, Shane. Let's listen to some more of what this guy has to say. We've been doing crowd stuff for a while. I'm still scrolling too, though. I'm not even getting anywhere near. Let's see. Programmers do not predetermine everything in capital letters. They just determine everything in small caps. like a regular English sentence. Yeah, exactly. You say that God doesn't allow for agency, which is just a straw man. It's just not what Calvinists believe. You are suffering from the same ailment that Jamie is suffering from, in that you are not physically capable of representing what Calvinists believe about the agency of men. That men have a will, men have volition, men are agents, but they're not free agents. They are agents who are enslaved to one thing or another. As Jesus says in John 8, he who commits sin is a slave of sin. A slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. Therefore, Son of Man, Son of God, set you free, you shall be free indeed. And Paul goes on to expound on that idea and say that once you're set free from your enslavement to sin, you are only set free so that you can become a slave of righteousness. So where is this neutral gray area? Where is it? Can you show me where it is? No, you can't. The only thing that you are physically capable of doing beyond the fundamentals is misrepresenting what I just said. You're not physically capable. Like you, seriously, I want you to pay very close attention to what I'm saying right now. That you are not capable, physically, you are not capable of just like saying rogue Calvinists said this, and then putting quotation marks, and then saying exactly what I just said verbatim, and then putting a period and then just posting it. You're not capable of it. Try it. Prove us that you have this free will that you're talking about. You don't have to misrepresent me. You have a choice not to. You can put quotation marks and repeat. Just you can rewind the video and listen to what I just said to you like 6 times until you got it, and then you can type that in and post it. Do it. Just show us that you can physically do it. And when you can't, we'll see. Okay. Well, beyond the fundamentals, if I've imposed positions on you that you don't believe, and it's a lie, then I've done that because I'm a liar, right? You guys are like, somebody calls you a liar, you're like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not a liar. No. Oh. Yeah, you are. And I'm a liar too. No, I haven't intentionally lied during this video, but I am a liar. That's what someone who lies is, a liar. Right? You guys act like you don't watch Ray Comfort. By your own admission, you're a dirty, rotten, pride flag waving liar. Oh, just relax. He is. I know. Look, beyond the fundamentals, and this is how you can tell they're in the same boat. Beyond the fundamentals is like the Muslim guy we had in here yesterday. Same thing. Who was in here when we had that Muslim in here during the stream yesterday? Same thing. It's not quite as over the top because he's still got to pretend to be a Christian. Muslim doesn't have that obligation. Same thing though. I was responding to Kelly Gibson when I said that. Good call, Kelly Gibson. I'm still scrolling the comments here, and I just can't help but notice that neither Beyond the Fundamentals or Jamie Russell has taken me up on my free will challenge. I guess you guys don't have free will. You're opposing positions that we don't hold. Perhaps try it for, okay, maybe give me a position then. Take the guesswork out. How would you give me a position on 1 Kings 22? How would you give me a position on that passage in Judges that we talked about, the ill will spirit? Give me a position on it. Take the guesswork out. Quit heckling me. You heckler? What do you got, like 53,000 subscribers, and you're heckling some guy that has 5,000? Let me look how many subscribers you have. Let me look. Oh, let's do it on here. I was going to do it on my phone. But Beyond the Fundamentals. Oh, okay. 18,000. That's still a lot more. Calvinism's defunct faculties. You got any, do you have any copyrighted music in that video? If not, we'll check it out. Let's check it out.
I don't want to take the Pelagian battery that Augustine latched onto. So what am I going to use? We're going to use, this is a picture of a smart person over here, okay? In case you're trying to figure that out. That's what ChatGPT thinks a smart person looks like.
Would you just type in a smart person in ChatGPT, like as an image prompt, and that's what they came out with? That's what's up.
We are not going to have an unscriptural presupposition or presumption of the human will.
So glad you said that. So glad you started out with the idea of an unscriptural presupposition. So, with that in mind, we're going to approach every single presupposition that you bring up in this video. At least, it's only 16 minutes. We can probably do it. All right, let's start.
We don't have any need for that. That's not our favorite thing. We're going to have beginner's mind. We're going to have first principles thinking. We're going to engage the right hemisphere. We're going to avoid propositional reduction. We're not going to have a dogmatic.
Engage the right hemisphere.
System.
Okay.
We're not going to develop our.
What is it? We're not going to have any presupposition, and no unscriptural presuppositions, right, whatsoever. But engaging the right hemisphere helps us understand Scripture. Where'd you get that presupposition? Beyond the Fundamentals. Where'd you get the presupposition that says engaging your right hemisphere is going to help you understand this better?
Our stuff in a rivalrous dynamic. We're going to use the Ephesians 4:16 edification model, not a rivalrous dynamic. What happened over here? Rivalry. Rivalry caused him to be so blind, he went back to his previous religion and the same premise of his opponent in order to form a new system. You can't even spell stupid better than that. That's the best way to be stupid, is to do what Augustine did. That's the best way to be stupid. No presuppositions. Now, that's easier said than done. When I say no presuppositions, I am not under the illusion that we don't all have them. In other words, I still have presuppositions, but we need to understand that we are on a quest to discover and eliminate our presuppositions to the greatest degree that we can. And we need to.
I'm glad that you said that. That's a very important part of preparation to exegete. It's called, that specific style of preparation is called the authority dialogue model. You're holding scripture in the authority and you are dialoguing with it, keeping in mind every presupposition that comes to your mind as you're reading the text. And if you can rebuild that presupposition from the text, you keep it. If you can't, you throw it in a trash can fire and get rid of it. Let's see if Beyond the Fundamentals does that.
To do so with the tenacity of a pit bull dog. Okay, we need to be very serious about finding and eliminating our presuppositions. And
yeah, and so instead of eliminating the presupposition that engaging the right hemisphere helps you understand scripture, Beyond the Fundamentals isn't going to get rid of that presupposition that he can't build from the text. He's going to justify the presupposition in this comment section here. Right? Right or wrong, guys? Rogue. That's not a presupposition. That's not an unscriptural presupposition. It's a derivative of years of study. Okay, so you're not willing to get rid of presuppositions that can't be found in Scripture. Okay, let's keep going and see what else there is.
So I like talking with people. I like having conversations with people. But when I'm on the phone with somebody or in a dialogue with somebody, either in a message or an email or in chat or something like that, and I can tell they're just riddled with presuppositions, I'm like, please do me a favor and take epistemic practices seriously and try to eliminate some of your presuppositions so that the conversation can be more productive. Now, if you're earnest, I'm willing to have a conversation with you. But if you're struggling, if you don't even know that.
I see, and he says, if you're earnest, we're willing to have a conversation with you. Well, we just went through 1 Kings 22, and you're not even approaching anything that we've said about this lying spirit that God said. You're just going on and on about how stupid Calvinists are. Oh, they're so stupid, and they're so one-dimensional, and all this other nonsense. You're not genuine. Why pretend?
You're loaded with presuppositions you got to get rid of. There's a lot of things that need to happen prerequisitely before you can really grow and transform. But you need to have a rigorous, tenacious program in your life by which you identify and eliminate presupposition. It needs to be a very active part of who you are.
I agree with that 110,000%, if that's even possible. Beyond the Fundamentals says, 1 Kings 22 doesn't oppose anything about my perspective. I already commented on it earlier. Okay, well, I missed your comment.
That you do this process all the time. So I have in the middle here some focal lenses that we can look through. So what if we look through the 4 kinds of knowing, or moralism, or ego, or modality, or brain hemispheres, locus of authority, orientation, stages of development, spiral dynamics, rivalry or antagonism, resilience, edification modality, like Ephesians 4:16, or something else, Ephesians 4:11-12, 2 different things, certainty or uncertainty, shared fiction.
Are you actually going to deal with any scripture in this video? Because I have no idea what you're even saying right now. I really don't. And I think that's kind of the trick. Like, you make yourself sound really, really smart, and then people are just like, wow, man, this guy sounds really smart. I'll just believe him. So why would somebody put all this work into this presentation if they don't know what they're talking about? Why would someone use these kind of words if they don't know what they're talking about? Hopefully you'll get to some scripture here. I hope.
Epistemology,
I really don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Operational metaphysics, objectivity. Now, all these things are going on, whether you realize it or not, all these things are going on in your decision making and in your perception of reality, and you don't even know it. Okay. What I'm trying to do on this channel in our growth and transformation content is raise your awareness of these things. Raise your awareness that these things are available there for you to look through, and there are many others. This is not an exhaustive list. And that the more fluent you get in in reading through these lenses, the more metaparadigmatic and the more perspectively capable you can become. So with the 4 kinds of
Oh, I see. So your trick is to convince your audience that Calvinists are wearing all of these different kinds of lenses, and that's it. Okay.
knowing, everything on the left-hand side is propositionally normative. On the right-hand, and by the way, this is epistemic arrogance over here, and this is epistemic humility over here. On the right-hand side, you have all 4 kinds of knowing. People, when
Is the power of God for salvation in this video?
they hear me talking about proposition, they think I'm against propositional knowing or against the use of propositions. No, I'm not. You need all 4 kinds of knowing. Propositions are great as long as they point to something real. Propositions are signifiers. If I talk about this coffee mug, and someone who speaks Chinese also talks about this coffee with people, we see people as individuals, not as categorical members of a group. Like,
we got to pick a different video, dude. I don't have any idea what you just said in any of that. Let's see. Calvinists label their critics as evil while evading scrutiny. Calvinists and the genetic logical fallacy. Calvinism's pretentious depravity. Transforming the inside to match the outside. What? Let's try this one. Let's see if you got something
in favor. So what happened back during the time
Calvinism's pretentious depravity,
this Pelagian controversy with Augustine? You see, Augustine had previously written in favor of free will, and I'm having
him, just like Leighton Flowers, his inspiration. They hate Calvinists. Look. Is this a guy who is out here trying to look, it looks like you took a break there for a little bit. So, I'll go where I was about to go. I won't go where I was about to go because it looks like you did take a little break, for a little while from just bad-mouthing Calvinists. Well, let's see.
to distinguish that, because a Calvinist will say, "Oh, we believe in free will. You're free to sin."
Nope. I don't believe in free will. Let's just go ahead and get that on the table right now. I do not believe in free will. No kind of it. No free will whatsoever. Your will is enslaved to one thing or another. You're either enslaved to sin or you are enslaved to righteousness. There is no free will. Zero free will. You have an enslaved will. Free will is paganism. And let me go into that a little deeper. A will that is completely free from any moral enslavement whatsoever is paganism. It's not Christianity. Don't be fooled.
Calvinists don't actually believe in total depravity. When you start talking,
let me guess. Let me guess what you're about to say. You're about to take the phrase total depravity and spin that into your own meaning and then say we don't really believe it, instead of recognizing that the terminology just sucks. Right? Because what do Calvinists really believe ultimately? That we're dead in sin. And then someone turned that into the phrase total depravity and ran it.
to them, and I say, well,
I think that it sucks. It's not a good term. It's not. It doesn't explain itself. It sounds like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's not. It doesn't explain itself. But let's see what you do with it.
well, I know people who do not profess Christ, and they do good things. They got married, they had kids, they're a doctor, they invented devices that save children's lives. They, saved kids from burning buildings. They pay their mortgage, they pay their taxes. They make decisions all the time. They make
Okay. So I see what's going on here. So just like I said, you're twisting these words, total depravity, and using like what those words could naturally mean in a sentence, that when they're not specifically referring to this doctrine, like as we don't believe that mankind is totally depraved, as in there's nothing, like no benevolent action has ever taken place whatsoever. No medicine has ever been made. No, you know what I mean? Like no one's life has ever been saved. No atheist can reach down into a river and pull a drowning person to safety. It's not possible. That's not what total depravity does not mean that humanity is totally depraved. It doesn't mean that. Total depravity means that the totality of human nature, every part of the being that is a human, is affected by the result of what took place that Paul interpreted in the garden, Romans 5:12 through 21. That event has totally affected our being, mind, heart, our flesh, our soul, and our spirit. But we are totally affected by something. It doesn't mean that that's why I say it's not good terminology, because total depravity, when it's used as a title for this doctrine, doesn't mean what the words mean. Okay? And I'm sorry, I didn't come up with the phrase. I really didn't. And I don't like it.
make decisions to vote, that make decisions to buy things, to make major, getting married, buying houses, buying cars. They earn money honestly. I know some atheists that adopt kids and out of
Hang on,
drug home.
I wasn't looking at the audience there for a second, but I just got your message. Beyond the fundamentals. Let's see. I really want to deal with what you're saying, man. I really do. I really, really do. Listen. Yeah, radical corruption. That's a good word. It's cool. But, I just prefer dead in sin, honestly. I really do. I wish the doctrine was just called the doctrine of being dead in sin. Anyway, fundamentals said rogue. The false dichotomy. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, a false dichotomy means that I'm presenting two options, but there's more. I'm presenting it like there's two options, but there's really more than that. It's false that I'm saying there's one option in something. So what's the false dichotomy? The false dichotomy you're looking for is to equivocate between total depravity and absolute depravity. That's the next Calvinist talking point that Calvinist NPCs use. Calvinist NPCs. Dude, what are you, 14, man? You look a whole hell of a lot older than 14. Right? Don't talk to me about NPCs, man. You got a genuine question, ask it. Okay? Man, I'll tell you what. You should be talking to me like this, dude. I'm 37 years old. What are you, 50? NPCs. NPCs.
Where these kids can now have an opportunity to grow up in a safe, loving environment. So you're going to tell me that And so they'll say, no, 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 you're talking about absolute depravity, that man is definitely as bad as he possibly could be. And this is another word game, because Calvinism is just word games. If you go to the dictionary thesaurus and you look up absolute, you will get total as one of the substitute words. If you look up total, you will get absolute. Total depravity, absolute depravity. If you don't recognize that those are based,
Like it's like a teenager trying to slip an insult in there, just like to get under my skin, which is working less and less and less. It really is. It just, I find to be very idiotic, because that's what they do, right? Like, if you don't have an argument with what I'm saying, just say that I'm an NPC. That ought to do the trick, right? That ought to do the trick. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like video games, but I haven't had very much time to play any lately. But I have another channel that I'm going to start doing some video game lore soon. My phone is about to die, and that's when I'm looking at these messages. I definitely didn't. Oh, you know what? As a matter of fact, man, my kids are about to get off the bus. I started this at 12. We've been going for 2.5 hours now. Yeah, I've got a gaming channel already. I've just only put up 2 shorts on it. Like, I think we live streamed a couple things, because I was doing some video game stuff on this channel, but it was just kind of the algorithm. You have to niche down. You have to get really niche specific, because the algorithm, say you make a good video about Zelda Ocarina of Time and you get a whole bunch of people who are interested in that topic, watch the video, well, and they subscribe to you, well, the algorithm isn't going to take that into consideration. They're just going to take into consideration the fact that they subscribe to you. And then when you come out with a video on Calvinism, it's going to send that video to the 200 people that just watched your video about Zelda Ocarina of Time, and they're not going to click on it. And then, even though it might be a great video, because the algorithm sent it to people who aren't interested in that kind of video, it gets no views, and then therefore the algorithm doesn't continue to send it out, because the people it first sent it to, who are your subscribers, didn't even click on it. So why would other people click on it, even though it's not the right audience and other people would click on it? So with that in mind, I've deleted pretty much all of my video game content except for the chess stuff. I thought maybe we could just keep that around, and that's been okay. It's worked out pretty good. But the other channel is called Station-RPG, if anyone's interested in that. But yeah, it's getting pretty late, and actually I got to get ready for my kids to get off the bus pretty soon. So I appreciate everyone being here, and usually, as long as someone's being genuine in their questions, and they're not being a Pharisee trying to back me in a corner with a question that they think I might answer the wrong way, I'm willing to conversate with anyone, But if you say something crazy, I'm going to call you out immediately. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, you're not saying something crazy. The next stream, Charles, what is today? Thursday? I mean, honestly, man, right now my plan is to stream every day during the week at noon. That's my plan right now. I'm going to stream on this channel mostly. I'm going to slack off on the production videos a little bit, except for some shorts, and then like a stream. And then I'm going to start doing some production videos on my Station RPG channel, where we're going to start doing some lore stuff. Zelda, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, stuff like that. I'll get on my other channel real quick and post a comment in here so that anyone who is interested in video game content can go, man, I love this thumbnail. I think this is my best thumbnail yet. Yo, yo, yo. That was my voice to text. That's my other channel, Station RPG. Jump on that and subscribe. I'm going to be having some lore production videos coming out soon. Just some obscure lore. Zelda is one of my favorite franchises. But yeah, anyone who has any questions remaining, just ask them in the comments and I'll be around. But I got to get off here and get my sons off the bus. So I appreciate everyone being here. Had a very lively crowd today, so that's very appreciated. And come on, beyond the fundamentals. Dude, look, you can't trick me with your fancy words, okay? I'm impervious. So do better next time. Something went wrong. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, cool. I got a lot of subscribers from that. Manage videos. Live. I'll open that. And 3, 2, 1, good night.